There we go. We'll go. Okay. Hi guys, I'm Mike, and this is F1 Fanatics. Welcome back to the channel, and we have Bart joining us again. Obviously, you may have remembered from earlier in the season, we spoke to Bart going into his first British F3 season, talking about his career to date and everything. And obviously now we are in December. He's had that first British F3 season. I mean, COVID had hit at that time, but I don't think, we really knew what was going to happen when you would be looking at that preseason going into it. So in your first season, you finished 10th, 288 points. You got 3 podiums in the end with a best result at Silverstone, and came top of your teammates in the Lannan Racing team. But what we're going to do today is just basically talk to Bart about that season, because it's going to be one of those seasons that is going to be weird to say that you competed in, I think, during COVID, because yeah, such a strange one. But anyway, mate, how are you?
I'm brilliant. Thanks for having me. Yeah, feeling great. Just keeping busy at the moment. Similar to before. I mean, it never seems to stop. But I think I'll give myself a break around Christmas a bit. But at the moment, it's next year, sorting out drive for next year, training, making sure I'm fit enough, and keeping my skills sharp. So yeah, just keep doing what I'm doing.
That is when you're on the kind of ladder going up. There is no rest for the wicked, as they would say. It is just kind of a relentless push, because you got so many other guys around you who are wanting the same goal, which is to be a professional racing driver at the end of this. And well, the ultimate dream is F1 for a lot of people. But obviously, I think you've done a little bit of testing the last time we talked in the British F3 car. We spoke about obviously it having an upgrade on its aero package this year, it being quicker than obviously anything you'd driven beforehand. But yeah, going into that season, it was pretty exciting, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it's still exciting in some ways, because it's just a new experience. I think always when you go up, especially the first round, you're a little bit nervous of what you don't know, which I think is normal. But it's fun. I just in that new environment, in the new car. I mean, even now when I've been testing postseason, and you feel a little bit more settled. Like, you get in the car, it's not the same event. It's not you're not like you're not surprised by the speed or the performance or anything. In fact, it starts to feel a bit slow. If anything, I've noticed the last few days is like, can this go a bit faster? But no, it's still to me, the British F3 car and the championship was a really great event, and great that it was run over such a difficult time, and that I just, every time I look at the car, even when I'm in Park for May or the dummy grid or something, I look at like another car or look at my car, I just think that's such a nice little racing car that I'm going to get to go out in a few minutes time, or I was just racing then, and just do whatever. It's my car and I get to race it. It's just, it's a strange feeling, but it's really nice to have, and it's a really good package, and I've just enjoyed driving it.
Yeah, I definitely probably feels like a pinch yourself moment going, you know what? I am a racing driver.
Yeah.
I'm on this ladder. I'm driving single seaters, which is something that competitively a lot of people dream of doing in terms of that opportunity. And you go, actually, yeah, I'm rocking up at these racetracks. Obviously, in all the gear, you're turning up to the garage, going ahead, and you're going, wow, is this really happening? And very cool. And obviously, being in British F3, you basically get to go on all the classic British circuits around the country as well. And you started off at Alton and started off with a podium. I think it was 3rd place in the second. Have I got that right?
Yeah, that's right.
So yeah, it wasn't. I know you felt confident in terms of the pace going into the season, but it must be nice to get a podium in the kind of first round.
Yeah, I think it's always a nice thing to back up. I feel like sometimes you need, as confident as, I feel like I am in my own ability and things like that, and all the work you do is proof of that. You sometimes you do you at least for me, I race, you know, to win and to do my best and to see a result, whether that be a win or third or whatever is representative of all the hard work and the time I put in. And so seeing a result like that is, I think it's a big part of why I do what I do. And it's not just the trophy or just the position or just the win if it is a race win. It's everything that goes into it. It's that proof that I should be doing this. This is why I do this. This is why I work so hard for this. So I think it's a really important part of that process, and it makes you want to keep going, and just keep pushing ahead.
Yeah, and that team atmosphere, like you're saying, because I think we can often forget motorsport. It's one of those ones where you, as the driver, you're the spotlight. You're the guy everyone looks to. You're the guy who goes and stands on the podium most of the time. Obviously, if it's a race win, there's usually a guy from the team who kind of goes up with you. But obviously, yeah, not going to say anything bad, but I think it's fair to say this isn't just kind of talk. But you and Lannon got on really well through the season, and I think you just kind of gelled together as a driver and a team.
Yeah, I think that's obviously important, and you want to, and to an extent, you can work that, or you can get a feel for that in pre-season, like or the previous year, or just through the same way you'd meet and talk to any human. Just and grow a relationship with somebody, but it's it's still, you still don't really know until push comes to shove. I think what you always find is you don't it's hard to know if you trust somebody until something goes really wrong. It's easy to be happy and it's easy to be someone's friend when everything's going right and when you're winning. In fact, I argue, for anything I've learned from this year, the winning and when stuff's going well, that's the easy part, and the hard part is when everything's gone to crap and everyone's struggling and you're slow or there's been a crash or a reliability problem. Like, how everybody pulls together in those circumstances is far more important. I think we were tested countless times, and I think generally the key was I always felt like I had people behind me, and that was massive. I'm not sure I could have gotten through the year in the same way if it wasn't for everybody at Lannon. Mechanics, engineers, everybody working in the team, even the other drivers. I think there was a lot of camaraderie there and a good atmosphere, a lot of respect for each other, and like a work ethic of hard work. And we're going to, do our best no matter what, no matter where we are, and deal with the problems that we're dealt. So yeah, it's certainly, it's one of those things that you're really happy when you have that kind of relationship with a team.
Yeah, and it is always that gamble, especially through the junior ladder, because it's quite often jumping from series to series. It might be with the same team. You're lucky, in some aspect, if they drive in both series and it's moving up with them in the ladder. But quite often the time, this was your kind of first year with Lannon. You didn't know how it'd go, and it was nice that it all kind of pulled together. And like I said, it is often in our failures that we learn the most, especially, as a young driver. Quite a lot of this period is you learning and improving. You're not the finished article. You're not like going to go and win a world championship tomorrow. You're learning, you're improving all the time, and it's having that right supportive environment. And it sounds like Lannon certainly was that for you this season.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think in everything, you learn from your failures a lot more than you do from your successes. Not that you can't learn, but I think the faults are a lot more obvious, and there's just more to learn. And I think, it was, even though sometimes it's really hard to be harsh on yourself and others and draw attention to things you don't necessarily want to kind of draw attention to. It's a bit like opening a wound almost. In some ways, you can feel a bit vulnerable, and you don't really want to talk about that or think about that too much. But I think it's been really important for me to, realize what I did wrong, what maybe other people did wrong, and then, work on that, build on that, and then take that going forward and use it in the best way I can.
Yeah, and that driven personality, obviously, we picked up on it in our first interview that had, and finishing top 10, in your first British F3 season, considering that obviously everything that went on this year, and it's tough stepping up to a new category to keep going. I know the person you are, and we obviously had a pre-chat before this. Inside you're not going to be like, oh, 10, that's great. And
Yeah.
that's fantastic. Obviously, you want to be higher and you want to be doing better. But how would you have rated your first season in British F3?
Do you mean in terms of like a number? Or say if I,
Well, you can give a number if you want, but
Yeah,
just talk about how you personally felt that you did in this first season.
I feel like I think the best thing I have to compare it to, because I would only realistically say my 2 years of professional or attempted, we'll say, professional racing was last year in British F4 and this year in British F3, and I think they're the two very obvious things I can compare. And for me, obviously I'm going to be a better driver this year. You need to be that. You would hope for that. I need to keep improving and go forward. You're in a faster car. You're against better drivers, more challenging tracks, etc. But even from that, I think I not only trained harder in the preseason and trained harder through the season, but when push came to shove, and I think I was tested more times, I feel like I was given less reprieve this year, especially with the season being so short. I mean, to be honest with you, Alton feels like a really long time ago. I'm really struggling to recall memories from that. It feels like it was in March or April whenever it was meant to start, but it was only a few months ago, which seems crazy. But no, I definitely think I dealt with a lot of the stuff a lot better this year. I think I definitely grew a lot as a driver, and I'm like I can see that improvement on sims, and when I do driver training and things like that, I can see that I've improved, and I'm really happy with that. But more than anything, I'm very happy with my ethic and I did a lot of things this year that I didn't want to do. I made myself do things where I felt uncomfortable and push myself out of my comfort zone. And I think more than that, I think like I said before, I grew as a person, and I dealt with things that I didn't necessarily want to deal with, but it was kind of important for me to deal with. I feel like it was a good year for me in terms of maturing. It's going to be quite important going forward. I feel like a long way away from the person I was a few months ago, which again feels kind of crazy because it's not actually that much time, but the amount of stuff that goes on, I guess you kind of expect it, and the amount of highs and lows that you go through over a racing season when it's squashed like that, it just it makes it even more impactful. So no, but I think I'm extremely happy with how I did, especially I feel like in the last few rounds I really built upon what I learned earlier in the season, learned from my mistakes, and I felt like I put in a really great performance. To be honest, part of me was really upset when I got damage on the first lap at Silverstone that ended my race, because I felt like that weekend had almost been the perfect weekend for me in some ways. I felt like my attitude and my driving and qualifying, and the two, especially in the two races, I thought I'd absolutely maximized and used every opportunity I had. So I kind of wanted to like almost complete the perfect weekend in my book from my perspective, because I don't feel like I've ever really done that, like a faultless and perfect, maybe a bit strong, but a weekend that was super, super, super strong, like very few things. Because even when you're successful and I think you do well, you get a podium, you get a race win, there's bits sometimes where you go like, I could have done better, I could have tried a bit harder here. It's very easy to do. You're always fighting yourself on that kind of front. But I feel like as the season went on, I got a lot stronger, especially mentally, and I've got a lot to that I can take from this season, and I'm proud of myself for that, because I feel like I pushed a lot harder, and I dealt with things a lot better than I did the previous year.
I think, as a driver, it is probably quite easy to get distracted when you're around, especially kind of as a young driver, and you're seeing everyone and kind of going, he may be quicker or something this weekend, or getting something out of it. And yes, at some level, you probably do have to compare to it. But I think that focus of just what you're saying there, of really driving yourself and personally challenging yourself, that's realistically the only one you control. And it's fantastic to see how, I can even just tell the confidence in an ability, obviously everyone goes confidence and arrogance can go, but I think for
Yeah.
you, it comes across as a clear line of confidence that has developed and improved throughout this season. And that's what you need to do. Challenge yourself, put yourself out of the comfort zone, because, heck, that's what my rival's going to be doing. And, I've got to try and push myself to the limits of what I'm capable of and probably go beyond that. But, like you said, Alton feels like it was back in March, but the season was a lot more condensed.
Yeah.
Than it would have been. And obviously the elephant in the room is COVID restrictions and everything there. So what was it like being a driver in the 2020 season? In what, support wise, it just kind of, you wouldn't have the usual people supporting you, turning up at racetracks. And I obviously talking a bit before, saying how, each racetrack pretty much had a different protocol. Yeah. What was that experience actually like this year?
It was obviously an interesting one. And to be honest with you, I feel like at the end of the season, it normalized itself a bit because you got used to it. You were still getting different restrictions, different tracks, and different weekends, and different days on the weekends, because some days are test days and practice days and race days. So the restrictions changed slightly. But I feel like at the end of the season, you got used to it a lot. Like, you knew the protocol, you knew what you were doing. I have to say, it felt normal. Like, if someone's coming up for a test now, I just went for a test, I would have forgotten about what it was like testing earlier this year, which kind of gives you an idea of how quickly we kind of adapt to things and how quickly things can change, and we just deal with it. But I do remember at the start, especially like the first day, it was very much like we knew kind of like what to do, but everyone was quite cautious and a bit paranoid, I guess, or unsure of what they can and could not do. And I think obviously over time, teams, drivers, the people who run the track, groups like MSV, MSA, they got better at shoring up what they wanted and what they didn't want, and working out rules and things like that. So I think everyone did well in it, and got a lot stronger as the year went on in that respect. Because it is one of those things that's really hard to do without some experience because of how it's going to work, which was the biggest threat before the season, I think, was the task of, we're not sure how exactly we need to control this. So is it safer just to not do it at all? Thankfully, that didn't happen. And we were able to get spectators at quite a few rounds. But again, this whole thing about a track dependent thing, because say you go somewhere like Alton, and what you could do is you could just bar people from the inside paddock, and it's very easy because I don't know if you've ever been to Alton or seen it, but it's very separated on the inside, and you just leave all the teams and drivers in there, and then you can let people go out all around the outside, and it's easy. But then you get somewhere like Snetterton, where to get to quite a bit of the viewing area, you need to go through, or Donington's actually the worst one because the main entrance is the paddock. So that made it quite difficult for viewing and things like that. So that's just the problem. It's the tracks aren't designed for it. So some tracks, it's really easy to separate spectator areas versus the paddock, because obviously people weren't allowed into the paddock unless they were essential personnel. So it would just be me and my father, or me and my mental or performance coach. One, maybe two people, depending on the weekend or the type of day, and things like that. Maybe when I had some people who were sponsors and that come to the track, they would get like a spectator ticket and they would be watching from the other side of the track, and maybe I could go out and then go and see them, abiding with all the protocol and everything like that, and then come back in. But which is obviously a bit awkward, and that's the worst thing, I think, was not being able to give that experience. And I'm sure it affected a lot of other drivers more so than me, not being able to sell to sponsors, like bring 10 people into the paddock. And because I think the paddock atmosphere, and I mean, it's good in some ways because you don't have to worry about running over people when you're driving, which sounds stupid, but when there's like so many people walking around, you're in your racing car with a terrible turning circle and terrible visibility, it can actually be a bit of a problem. You usually rely on people hearing you first to get out of the way. But I remember last year just having people like crawling all over the place and people taking videos and things like that. And there's something so nice about that atmosphere and just people coming up to the um, front of where the team was set up and just saying hi or saying like some photos signed or something like that. And I think that for me was the biggest thing. Was a bit sad. I was just missing that connection with me and the people who come to watch. The reason, I always wanted to be a driver, but I was always a fan, and I still am a fan of motorsport. And I understand that. I love, well, if I turn up to an F1 race, I'm not sure I drive racing cars and things like that, but I'm there as a fan. I want to see the drivers who I support, and I'm fans of them and the teams and of what they do. So it's a bit sad for me to not see that kind of that passion for the sport that you get with so many people after getting that at the touring car weekends last year. And it was still nice to see the amount of people that did turn up, that could turn up in the spectator areas and having them by the sides of the track. It was it felt a lot better than having just this cold, empty place. But it was definitely lacking something in the paddock.
Yeah, no, the fans are such a massive part of the sport. And like you said there, you being a fan of motorsport yourself, and especially at this level of motorsport, the guys and girls tend to attend the events. They're proper diehard motorsport fans. They're the ones who, they're like going, I'm really invested in also seeing the future of motorsport coming through, because they'll be one of those stories to friends. Oh yeah, I remember watching him in British F3 type of thing. But yeah, did it almost, the ones where it was stricter restrictions, how did it kind of feel? Although obviously you knew you were competing on a race day, did it almost almost feel like a test day because of really having too many people about?
I'd say it didn't feel like a test day. I'd say, funnily enough, so I believe, from what I can remember, the only round with no spectators was Silverstone, because MSV, because that's when the second lockdown came in. All the other tracks were MSV, which was good because even though they were different tracks, at least we had one organization running it, so we had some kind of consistency and understanding for that. And being an MSV championship, it helped us a bit. Still difficult sometimes to get the right tickets, and because of the system of how the passes worked and everything completely changed, so that was all could be quite difficult. That's why I said to you, sometimes I had to wait at the front gate for someone from the team to come with a buggy and give us the tickets or help us get in, because we didn't know necessarily what tickets you need on like a test day and when it was race day, because sometimes a Friday is a separate event, things like that. But it was, it's surprising how much of an atmosphere you get. It's kind of crazy, how much you're invested in the racing. Like at Silverstone, like I said, I think it normalized a lot by the end of the season, but I never really, it was a bit weird on the cool down laps and in the out laps, I'd say, where you get a bit more of, I think you just, not say look around more, but you have a better kind of understanding of the atmosphere and the fact that there's no one there. But it still feels like a race. I guess it's the pressure you make within ourselves, the pressure we put on ourselves, and the pressure from the environment and the other teams and the drives and things like that. I think that's just always there. Like it always felt like a race event. It was always okay, test day, here's racing. It was always, I never felt like, I'm not gonna, not that I would, but no, I'm not gonna try, or it doesn't feel like a real race event, because no, it always, funnily enough, it always felt like it never ever lost that same edge, I would say, as just a normal race. It was mainly, like I said, that missing kind of atmosphere of the fans and that kind of passion and everything you got, which is, I think there's a lot that can be learned from the Australian events and the Australian circuits here in the UK. At the touring car and the GT rounds, is like the access people get is just brilliant to the paddock and all that. Get so close up to so many great cars, especially in GTs with the GT3s, which some of them sound great, like the Mercedes and the Astons. So it's such an awesome, and the venues and the tracks are amazing too. So it's a really great thing to come and do, because you get a lot more access than you do at an F1 event, I would say, to get a lot more close up and personal with the drivers and the cars and the teams and things like that. An idea of what's actually going on behind the scenes, because it's in front of you. So it's a great thing, and it was just a shame that that wasn't available to, in the same way, to the same amount of people this year.
Yeah, I massively agree on that one. From when I've been to kind of junior events or events lower down the ladder
Yeah.
on the motorsport hierarchy. It definitely has. You just feel like everyone's more accessible. You
Yeah.
kind of almost, it adds to the experience of the day. Definitely, I feel as a fan, you kind of feel more invested and involved. You can get up close. You can see
Yeah.
the people working on the car. It isn't just this distant world on F1 through there, and usually having, I don't know, Karun Shandok or Ted Kravitz talking us through the garage. You can actually do that. Obviously, you can do that aspect in F1, but you normally have to sell your arm to kind of be able to afford to get those sort of opportunities. But you brought up Silverstone a couple of times, so we're focused on that. That was the best result this season, and obviously in the last round of the season, getting P2 in race 2, I believe it was.
Yeah, you're right.
So mixable conditions, and obviously this year has been quite up and down actually in terms of weather conditions, and I think it affected the F3 season as much as everyday life with weather and that with it. So and talk us through that performance a little bit more.
Well, yeah, I think part of what makes racing on these tracks so great, apart from the history and just the variance in the track layouts and things like that, is the weather. In terms of, you learn fast or you get beaten, basically, because the track conditions it's not wet and dry, it's everything between, and anything from red flag conditions to, at Snetterton, I think it was I was starting the back in that one because we had a problem in qualifying, and I remember just going to turn one, even once because there was a crash at the start of the first race because some people stalled, and obviously the cars behind came up and they couldn't see anything in front of them, so they did rolling starts instead, and just came up to turn one and I just couldn't see the car in front of me at all, and I tried weaving in and out of, because usually you want to go outside of their spray, but the problem is when you're 16th or whatever, the spray's all up everywhere, and it's I would have liked to be in first or second. That would have been a lot easier, but being that far back, and you got to think you're going into turn 2 at Snetterton or something like that, so I'm going to brake eventually. I don't know when, and I can't see the rain lights on the cars in front of me, so I guess I'll just brake now and not hope I don't hit them. So it's a bit of a test of courage and a bit of hoping and praying. But no, the Silverstone race was interesting because I think it was wet in the morning and it didn't rain, maybe sprinkled lightly by the time everyone got to the track. But Silverstone on this surface seems to hold the water quite a bit, and oddly enough, no wind at all, super still, which for Silverstone is almost unheard of. Usually you're getting, you're falling over because it's so windy, but so nothing was really clearing the water. I think a Porsche, with the second race on the day, some Porsches went out before us. They cleared it up a bit, and I think they were still wet. So most people were thinking, still wet. And at last minute, I don't know who it was, some brave soul said, I'll put slicks on. And then all of a sudden, half the grid, good, okay, let's put slicks on right in the dummy grid area. And everything just went crazy. I was happy to just sit on, because I was happy to go with whatever the team thought, because we'd taken a gamble on slicks at the previous round, Donington, that hadn't quite paid off. We'd ended up at the back of the field because of it. But this round, I thought, we decided on wets 20 minutes ago or something, and I thought we'd just stick to it. And then Graham said, effort, let's put on the slicks, and it was the right decision in the end. I think most of the grid went with slicks. Both the championship contenders went for wets. So some of the faster guys were out of it. It was a reverse grid race anyway, so they were starting at the back. We were starting either 9th or 10th, I think, somewhere in the middle in the mess of it, which is obviously a bit in the crash zone, as I would say. But no, it was really treacherous. I remember on the outlap, it was, because it was wet still, definitely wet. Just a little bit of water everywhere. At Silverstone, you don't really so much get the dry line and the wet line the same way you do at a lot of the other tracks. It just holds water. There's no standing water, there's no puddles, but it's just damp everywhere, just covered in a thin layer or veneer of water. And I remember going out on the warmth lap, and it's a little bit sketchy. You need to warm these tires with just stone cold slicks, but how much angle do I put on, because you just go on the barrier if you just put a bit too much load on the tire before they're too warm. And also you don't want to start graining it either if you put too much force on before you got any temperature in it. So there's always a bit of that kind of stuff playing on your mind. And then you go down the Grand Prix straight, where the F1 cars start, and that's completely again part of the problem with Silverstone, or the difficulty of it. Let's say with the wind and the water is that you get shielded by the pit buildings, both at the like the bridge straight and the Grand Prix straight. So we're going down there, and it's completely wet still. You're just going straight on the. I can see everyone on wet's like working really hard because now they got some water, and then everyone on slicks just sitting there going straight line. I'm thinking on first lap on the race, no one's gonna want to pass up the inside here. It's gonna be crazy. And then all of a sudden you go into Abbey, which is way drier because it hasn't been, protected. And at speed, that's like a flat out corner almost, or a lift, even on wets or on a damp track. So it was a tricky one at the start. I was really cautious, which helped me. I gained 2 or 3 places because you pull away like you're pulling away in a road car in those conditions. If it's dry, you can be really quick off the clutch, and these things will do starts in under 2.5 seconds if you get it right, from 0 to 60 miles an hour. So they're quick cars. But in those conditions, I'm sure we would have been way slower than that. Just being really cautious. All the people on wets go roaring past. I think the first 2 laps, the wets were the better tire. They pulled away. I think the top few cars were mostly on wets, and then you could see like the advantage on. I think I defended. Someone overtook me on wets in the next corner. I got them back, and then I thought, okay, that's it. Then they've gone because the wets can't peak. You got to not be peaking on lap 2 if you're on wets, because that's a long way before the finish, and the wet's just going to overheat and break up. And eventually, it worked in our favor. The key, I think, for me was not only that good start, but also on the first 2 laps when everybody's squabbling and that kind of thing, I got past a few cars reasonably quickly. If I got held up, I would have been caught up with people who were on wets and then would have had to, deal with them. Whereas I got past most of the people who were also on slicks right at the start. They're pretty aggressive when the tires are still cold, which meant I got into clean air and the guys at the front didn't get away. So I managed to catch up past them. The guys on wets just fell back. You just, because obviously wets aren't as smooth, and they're quite a bit slower in a straight line than the slick tire. So, because you're moving around on all the tread as well. So you just drive past them on the straight, it's easy to overtake. But every time you have to pass somebody on slicks in these conditions, which is generally why people usually want to go wets when it's kind of a toss-up, is you can't overtake on the slick tires because you move offline. What are you going to do? Just brake on the wet patch? You go sliding off and just crash into them or something like that. Fortunately, I think there was one place which was dry on the inside, which was into Village. It's the 3rd corner on the Grand Prix track, because I think it's because it had a little bit of camber and it was quite open. It had managed to dry up a little bit, so that's the one place you could go down the inside of people. But other than that, it was pretty sketchy, and a car in front of me almost lost it. And usually I would have just passed him, like got a good exit and gone straight past him. But if I went on the left, I would have been on the wet part of the track and I would have slid off and had an accident or something. So even though it was slick tires, it was still one of those races where it was kind of hard in mouth, like how hard do I push here? And you can see everybody. It's nice being behind another car sometimes because you can always just go like a bit harder than him, and it usually works if they don't end up making a mistake themselves. But it was just kind of chipping away. No, but it was a really fun race because you had to adapt to the conditions. It was constantly changing. And then I settled into a bit of a rhythm. I think I was in P3 behind Nazim Asman, and I had a few goes in him, and he defended and he covered and things like that. So I lost my best opportunities, and I was a bit weak out of a few of the important corners where you needed to get good exits to get for your best overtake opportunities. I had a few. I think I had maybe a look up the inside of club or something like that. But it was quite difficult again with the wet line. There was some place you didn't want to overtake. So I just kind of more than hung in there. I just focused on, next corners as good as possible to give yourself the best chance of getting closer. But it's always, it's one of those things that's difficult because the closer you get, the less performance you get. Even though you get a bit more of a toe, you lose so much downforce. I mean, Silverstone's one of the best tracks because you've got some long straights to help pull you along, but it's difficult following classes like this. Obviously why something like DRS was invented was because it's just really, really, really tricky to pass people, because as soon as you get closer and you lose just such a large amount of your aero performance, you can't really get a good exit on the car behind. on the car in front of you and make that overtaking move. But eventually I just put a really good lap together. It happened to be the last lap. And then he went to cover. He covered into Brooklands a bit early, and then I went really late down the inside and the left when I knew at the point where I knew he couldn't go left again, where he would only go right from where he was because he defended, and I thought at this point he'd only ever go back right to assume racing line, or he would only go straight. So there's no chance for him to cover me on the left, because what you don't want is me going left and he goes left in front of me, then I slam on the brakes and you get the Ricciardo Verstappen incident where, I don't have F1 levels of downforce and we're not going at the same speed, but I lose my front wing and I pick him up and then you have an accident, and it's probably your fault because you're the overtaking car, which I've almost had happen a few times, which is, that's why moving in the braking zone is dangerous, especially in cars like these. But it does happen and you got to watch out for it. So I just managed to luckily get up, just managed to put my nose on the inside. And once I was on the inside, I knew I was right, because at Brooklands, the inside was really grippy and the outside was it wasn't fully wet, but it was just greasy. And I could see, I remember thinking on like lap 1 or 2 or something, I'm not gonna, because it is a move you can pull off on the dry around the outside of Brooklands and then inside for Luffield, quite a, famous move. But I just thought I'm not doing that because it looks like there's no grip out there. And I thought if I could just get my nose up the inside, I could push someone out there and then get the move. So in the end, it paid off and I managed to get P2. And I think, to be honest, I had the speed for first place in that one. So it was a little bit like, that was a great race and I really enjoyed that. But if I passed it maybe a lap or two earlier, I probably maybe could have won that race. So it is always, that's this thing, isn't it? You do a really good race. You do, you have a really good race. You do a really good job, and then you think, oh, there's a bit more there. I should have done a bit better maybe. But no, it was just fun it was good to be back up on the podium again. And it was just good to have a race that was challenging, and then to, like I said, like respond to that challenge and raise your own level.
Sounds a hell of a race and a hell of a learning curve, I think, certainly on that aspect. And I mean, that's what you got to do as a competitive individual. You've always got to be looking, okay, that was great, but how could I be better? And so knowing that within yourself, I probably had, the pace for P1. Could I have found a way to get past second? And I imagine you probably kind of go through and look at the race and analyze, maybe if I'd done that. Well, also analysis was there. You missed out on some of the key corners, getting a better traction out the exit probably would have helped you in a couple of situations there. But, that's what you got to do. And it is, like we discussed mostly through this, it's that continual learning process. And it is so fascinating just hearing almost your learning process, tinkering as you're chatting, going, oh yeah, no, actually, no, I could have done that. And so that it's really interesting to hear. But, within motorsports, I think the first person or first people you always have to meet, because obviously, like in this series, there's multiple teammates that you have are your teammates, and you managed to do that this year. Obviously, Josh had a previous season experience with Lannon the year before, and Piers Pryor, I think, was your other teammate. Actually, the only guy to win for the team that season, but your consistency through the season meant that you finished above him. I think he finished P12 in the end. Felt good teammates to go up against. I mean, obviously, I'm not expecting you to go, oh, they were rubbish.
I would never anyway. I couldn't. I'm not allowed to, right? No, I would never. No, they're both great guys, and I really enjoyed this year. Again, I think what's important for me is, at the end of the day, you can't choose your teammates. Not really. I mean, sometimes a team, maybe you're weighing up 2 or 3 teams for next season, and they've already signed 1 or 2 drivers or no drivers, so you kind of know, like, maybe you're kind of choosing a teammate in a way, but you can't choose your teammate. You got to choose the team you want to go with, and your teammates are your teammates. And I think there's definitely been cases in recent years where, especially in the junior series, where one driver within a team has actually brought down their other teammates or ruined the season, for whether that be through their own fault or just by affecting them and things like that, or bring down the team as a whole. So it's an important thing to have that relationship. And I'm not really one to, I'm one of those people who, I'm not going to just bully my teammates or not be nice to them, because when then even though obviously you have to compete against them, and like you said, the most important people to be like fact is your teammates. Like it's always been like that, and it always feels like that. You're always reminded of that because the people you get compared to are them, because they're in the most similar car to you. And when you're working with the team, they're the ones whose video and data you see, so they're the ones you're getting directly compared with and learn from. So it's extremely important to beat them on a consistent, or try to beat them on a consistent basis as well as you can. And yeah, I've never been, like I said, never been one to purposely drag down my other teammates or do anything like that. But I've always thought, out of the car, I'll be as, I could get on with them as much as I like. If we get on really well, we can be best mates, whatever, or we can just, if we just don't work that well together as friends, then we don't have to be. It's not really something I worry about too much. I feel like what you do out of the car is very different to what you do in the car. I think a lot of the drivers now understand that, like, what you do in the car is one thing and what you do outside the car is another. So even if I have a crash with the driver in the car, or someone I've crashed with in the past, go-karting cars, whatever, some people get really agitated and really affected, I feel, relationship wise with that. Like they can hold a grudge and things like that. Whereas a lot of the drivers I've gotten on well with and I respect a lot, and I think a lot of the good drivers, I don't think they necessarily take that as personally out of the car with them, because I think, the way the person that someone is out of the car is different to who they are in the car. And I think you need to understand that a lot of the time. And so I'm happy to get on with people, even if I had incidents with them. Like some of my best friends around from karting, I've had like big shunts with and things like that. And yeah, even in car racing, getting on with people who I've had incidents with and tough battles with in the past, and maybe at the time, like straight after the race, you're a bit moody, which makes sense, it's only natural. But in reality, I think you just get on with the other drivers, even if it doesn't, you don't have a good relationship in the car. But I think the other way can work as well. I think there's people who don't necessarily get on that well outside the car, but they don't. There's nothing wrong with their relationship once they're driving against each other. They just respect each other on track. So yeah, I think I don't really mind as long as they don't get too held up on what happened on the track and then bring that off the track and keep talking about it, because I think it's so important when you get out of the car to disassociate from it and just do your best work, especially if you're your teammate. We need to make the car faster. We need to learn from each other. We need to go forward here. We need to do something productive. It's not about like he did this and who did that. Like that's not. I don't think that's healthy at all. Bring that out of the car with you, because we all do stupid stuff. We all do stupid stuff in the heat at the moment. And it's so easy to make mistakes. And that's why I don't hold people to a fault when they make mistakes on the track, as long as they, I think, understand it when they get out of the car. And like I said, they're not silly about it, and they don't kind of carry that for a longer period of time. But I think, yeah, it's important to have drivers who have a good attitude and want to work with you outside of the car. It's great to have somebody with good feedback. Hard to get, I would say, but somebody with really good car feedback, just a good feel what's going on. And then the other thing as well is it's actually nice to have people with different driving styles, different strengths, because it's so much better for me to be half a second down in the first half of the track and half a second up in the second half than half a tenth, half a tenth, half a tenth, or like me being slightly better everywhere, let's say, or me being slightly worse everywhere. Because then you learn a lot. I've had sessions where I'd be a long way up on somebody's lap time, but it's very, very rare you're quicker everywhere. There's always something you can learn from another driver. So I think, yeah, it's important to have people who are strong in different areas. And I think, it was really good having Piers and Josh, because they were very different types of drivers to me and each other. So it was good to have them. And they definitely were people who tried and worked hard. And in the past, I haven't always had that. So it was good to have people like that alongside me.
All right. It sounds a very good environment for you and each other to kind of go on. And I think your philosophy is definitely right. I think often in today's world of social media reaction, where we can get too up about what drivers say or do in the car. But I go, especially, when you look at F1, we're talking blink of a second reactionary times. I mean, for them, it probably does feel slower, because like you say, and even adapting to the car over the season, it now feels slower to you than what it did when you kind of first got into it.
Yeah.
But hey, just go and watch the average person. If everyone had a dash cam on, the road
Yeah.
rage would be unbelievable. And that's just going down to your local Sainsbury's and picking up your meal deal.
Yeah.
So put people in a highly competitive environment. It's understandable in the car it can get hot heads, but absolutely whatever's on track stays on track. And
Yeah.
when you get out the car, hey, that relationship's going to be totally different.
Yeah. Like I said, I respect people who, like, if I'm friends with the driver, I don't know, I don't want them to play nice. The people I respect the most are the people who put up the best fight. I mean, as long as they're not doing anything dangerous, but they're, doing their absolute best and they're giving it their all and that kind of thing, then, that's what I'd like to see on the track. And that's the people I usually get along with, or give you a bit of stick if you give them a bit of stick, kind of thing. So, yeah, definitely. That's what I'd like to see from racing.
Yeah, friendly rivalry is probably
Exactly.
the private. But okay, let's round this video off in terms of almost looking to the future. Obviously, you've mentioned testing there. I imagine I know you were kind of obviously saying you're hoping to have a bit of switch off of the Christmas, which is important. It's important to rest your mind and everything, and have a switch off. Nobody can function 24 hours, 7 days a week on it all the time. But yeah, I'm imagine the prospect is probably staying in British F3 for next season.
Yeah, at the moment it's yeah, definitely the goal is 100%. I think going next year, like I said, I think I've learned a lot, I've grown a lot. There's a lot I can take from this year, and I'm gonna obviously again give it my best. But I think this year I'm in a good position to compete for the championship, and that's where I want to be. That's I think where everyone wants to be is, you want to win the championship, but I think more than anything, you will need to be in that. You need to actually be in the championship kind of competing position in those top however many spots, given that opportunity by the team and the people around you, and with the effort you bring. And I think, the biggest thing is having that experience from a year. I mean, I've already felt it myself from having that experience in the car. You bring a lot more to the table in terms of how quickly you can fix stuff with car setups and things like that is night and day. And even jumping between different teams, I've learned a lot about what they do just to set up their cars in general, pedal positions, how they change, how quickly they make certain changes and things like that. And then I think it's so important if you're at a test day on a Friday and then you're racing Saturday, to be able to jump in the car, go, okay, I've felt this before. I know what's wrong with the car after 10 minutes of running, rather than having to do, 20 minutes to get accustomed to it and another 10 minutes, I'll do another session because I think there's a bit more time in me, and then making a change to the car rather than going out straight away, knowing what you feel and then just making that change. And I think that, as well as all the other stuff, is vital for pushing forward, because realistically, I think it's quite often underestimated how much pole position or a good qualifying or a good race performance, how important the build up towards that is. Not always. I mean, sometimes you see what I call more fluky pole positions because the positions kind of the track conditions will suit the car or the driver and that kind of thing. And they just, they do a great job, but it wasn't, it wasn't planned, but it wasn't built up to it. But quite often, like a championship winning season is done through people. You see they build up quite well through the weekend. And I'm sure people like Hamilton have that kind of structure, because you often see, especially towards the end this year, he wasn't always leading in practice. I'm sure that's because he wasn't trying to set the fastest time in practice. He was doing whatever, I don't know, but whatever he felt was necessary for himself or the car to feel confident to put it on pole in Q3, because that's all that matters. And then from there, get the best start I can get, then win the race. You know what I mean? It's that kind of process. And I think it's so important that from, an F1 standpoint, it's FP1. For us, we have Thursday, Friday testing usually. So from that Thursday morning, just quickly making steps forward, so you're constantly ahead of the people you're competing against, and in the best position possible on that Saturday morning.
Yeah, I feel like driver feedback is one of those skills that are underrated in drivers as a whole, because for fans, it's not something that's tangible, because a lot of that stuff that you're talking about is behind the scenes. We don't actually get to see that. That's to us, mainly as a fan, it's some bloke standing on a computer screen, tapping away at the keyboard, and you're like going, He's just one of the team. But yeah, you're right. That's such an important part of it. And the better you are at those type of things and adapting to different situations. And yeah, I imagine adaptability is such a key skill. And those guys who are or
Yeah.
girls adaptable throughout the whole process going up, the ones who can do that better are certainly the ones who kind of excel and progress quicker, because like you said, you can pick up things so much quicker, and then that means you can spend more time refining the fine percentages rather than trying to actually get you somewhere in the ballpark.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to be building a race car Thursday, in a not so much a literal sense, but you don't want to give yourself so much work right up to qualifying. You want to be kind of making the smallest increase in performance you can, making sure you got every little bit sorted, so there's nothing left on the table or nothing left to surprise you. And even though you got, sometimes you can't control changeable conditions or something goes wrong with the car, that happens, and you've got to, at the same time, you practice for that kind of thing. You kind of go, well, what if this happens, and you discuss it with your engineer. You would, I'd hope, try and work something similar to that, have an idea of how you would respond in that situation. But at the end of the day, you got to give yourself the best chance possible come qualifying. And a series like this, qualifying is key, because, like I said, the dirty air is difficult to deal with, and especially when the field's so competitive, that makes it even harder, right? When there's 10, you want to go, say you qualified 10th and you want to get to 5th. Well, the guy in 5th qualified, sure, he only qualified 1.5, 2 tenths faster than you, but you've got to pass these people who are doing that the same lap times as you, and you only lose performance the closer you get to them. So it's hard, you got to that's why things like tire preparation and getting a clear lap in qualifying, getting a good start at the start of the race is so important, because they give you opportunities you don't get otherwise just through normal speed, because everyone's so close on pure pace. So that's exactly, when you're building towards those opportunities, doing your practice in a way that builds well towards qualifying.
Oh, it's fantastic to hear, and obviously, it's going to be exciting. Another British F3 season. Hopefully, 2021 is a little bit more normality. I feel it will be some sort of a transition year, so we're not going to get to 2019 levels of racing at there. But fingers crossed, it's something, a little bit more open, like was discussed earlier in this kind of chat, with the fans' atmosphere and coming into the paddock and making it feel a little bit more like a race weekend. Not that obviously, the team, like you said, team, it affects you necessarily too much, but it's still nice to kind of share those experience, well, for family as well, without having to have that worrying of, where have I got to get the tickets from? How can I get them in? Everything on that aspect in there. So I'll ask, round off. Obviously, we know you F1 fan as well. Discuss Daniel Ricciardo. You're a fan of, naturally, coming from the same area from him. But what has been the F1 season, I don't know about what you think, has been a little bit mental for me. Obviously, you have the predictable element of Lewis winning and Mercedes doing, because they turned up with a car that was stupidly quicker than everybody else. But we've had 13 different people on a podium. We've had Sergio Perez win a race. We've had Pierre Gasly win a race. What's kind of been your favourite moments or standout moments of the season?
Favourite moments? I can't think of favourite moments. I mean, we got very used to the Verstappen, Bottas, Hamilton podium. I think it was one of those years where it should have been more boring than last year, but it wasn't. You know what I mean? Like, on paper, it should have been. It really, really should have been. But Mercedes built probably the best car ever. I mean, their 2016 car was dominant, and it only feels like, to me, over time, because initially they turned up with a really good engine, but it seems like over time they got better with, packaging, better with the downforce, and better at looking after tires and reliability. And they seem to just, and that's I think the most impressive thing from the Hamilton Mercedes, Wolf Mercedes era, is they kept pushing and they kept improving, which is the key. They made themselves a stronger team every year, and when people like Ferrari can't sustain that, they get punished for it. And you just see Mercedes keep going forward and forward and forward, which is impressive. It's, as I've said it, and as a fan, like, I think it's bad for the sport, like the dominance Mercedes. Obviously, it's bad for the sport, the dominance that Mercedes and Hamilton have had. I mean, all credit to them; they've done an amazing job. But I think it is hard, very Schumacher, Ferrari era-esque. And I don't know how much the difference rule changes will make. I mean, you'd be crazy not to say Hamilton and Mercedes again, because it's just such a dominant era and performance from them. And obviously it was boring to watch the same thing happen over and over. But I think it was certainly a very interesting year in terms of the relationships between teams and drivers unfolding, and how the driver market moved around, and because to be honest, who knows who wins out of all these drivers who are moving? Because at the start of the year, everyone thought McLaren looked amazing, and then Renault and racing. I mean, I think the Racing Point's an extremely good car that was kind of a bit. I think a lot of times Stroll and Perez didn't quite put it together in qualifying. Put that car in the right position. That car maybe could have won races or got near pretty. Like, I think it was pretty similar to the Red Bull maybe over a season, but I think the more experienced Verstappen and Red Bull team did a better job of competing at the front of the field, despite a few DNFs in the middle. But it's hard to say next year who wins. Is Vettel the big winner? Probably, going from Ferrari to Racing Point or Aston Martin, which will be good again. Seeing Aston Martin on the grid, it was cool to see a brand like that on the F1 grid. Always good to see that kind of thing. But who wins out of that? You got Ricciardo going to McLaren and Sainz going to a Ferrari that I hope for his sake's better, because he's been, I think, extremely impressive. Once again, I think Norris kind of fell flat in the second half of this year. He was extremely impressive out the box. He had that podium, did he, in the first round. And yeah, sure, Abu Dhabi, that qualifying lap was something special. But I think everybody knows, what Norris is capable of in qualifying. And I think, if anything, in some ways, I've been more impressed by Sainz's ability to improve his own qualifying performances to be on par or almost better Lando in the second half of the year, and still maintain that race advantage, I would say, for the most of the season. And I think Carlos is looking like a really, really strong. I mean, we'll only putting him up against Charles Leclerc at Ferrari, who again has been. I feel like sometimes he really drops the ball, and a few of the lap point incidents and things like that were quite clumsy. But things like that Bahrain qualifying lap, that car is clearly not capable. I don't know how he does it. Honestly, he's one of those drivers, when he gets it right, he's just remarkable. Looks like he could be anyone. And just waltz off in the distance, which is what he did to win his F2 title, right? Dominated it completely. Yeah, it's hard to know what's going to happen, and it'll be interesting to see Carlos go up against Charles. I think, like I said, he's built towards becoming a really strong driver. And the other main point of the year, which is the thing that was most talked about recently, is obviously the Russell having a go in the Sakhir Grand Prix. And I thought, George was extremely impressive, considering he barely fit in the car. I've been obviously a fan of him because of his, not only is he a successful driver, and all the guys who get to F1 are great drivers, don't get me wrong. When we say, I think something a lot of people need to remember is when they bag like a Stroll or maybe like someone like a Sirotkin in the past, or Kubica, things like that, is these guys are so good. Like, you look at the people who dropped out of F1, like Verne and that they've just dominated or been at the front of other categories, like World Touring Car, Formula E, IndyCar. The F1 level is I just think it's amazing, the level of drivers we have now, even versus 10, 15 years ago. It just feels, I don't know what you think, but I think we really have 20 drivers are probably the 25 or 30 best drivers in the world, and absolutely probably the top 5 drivers in the world are all in F1, which is what we want to see. Is we want to see the best drivers in the world compete against each other. I think we're lucky to have that all in one arena. So it'll be, I think it's amazing for George, who stood out to me even within that environment, go into Mercedes, do what he did in the race scenario. Like, is now, a lot of people are asking questions of what Lewis is capable of, and is he worth 70 million a year if George can do this and things like that. And it's so that was the most entertaining part of the season for me. It was crushing to see what happened to him in the race. I thought it was almost a joke when that radio message came over. I thought that was so cruel, honestly, because the thing is, you never know when the next time he might be in a Grand Prix winning car is. You never know, and he'll never probably ever statistically be in a car that good again. So if you're George Russell, right, you don't know if he's not driving a Mercedes next year, and you never know. Mercedes might not have the best car by the time he's in it, or if he's not. I mean, fortunately for George, he's obviously extremely talented, and he works really hard, and he's going to have I imagine, a long F1 career, barring some strange incident. And he should be successful. You'd think at one point, like a Verstappen or a Leclerc or a Norris, but it's still tough to see that because you never know in Formula One. It's one of those things. Maybe that, I mean, it's a sad thing to say, but maybe you could look back at this in 2 or 3 years' time. This was his only chance. I mean, say you look back at like a Perez who had that chance at McLaren, and then he would be ruining that now on his way out, or a Danny Kvyat or Kevin Magnussen got a podium in his first race at McLaren, and it never got better from there, really, did it? It's just crazy, over time how it can kind of distort what's previously happened. So yeah, we don't know what's going to happen in the future, but I think it was really interesting to see George do such an amazing job, and how he responded to that in the race, especially after the safety car. He was just bang out of the box. I know he had better tires and he's in the best car in the grid, but it was just relentless, and you felt like he just had to win that race. Like he was just going to pass Perez. There's nothing he could do, and that he just seemed to dealt with everything that came to him so well. I mean, even after he had to do that pit stop for the puncture, he still managed to get points, didn't he? 8th or 9th place or something.
Yeah.
In like 5 laps or something. Some ridiculous amount of time. He just passed all these cars. So yeah, I think F1's in safe hands because we've got a lot of good drivers, and looking at the F2 and F3 grid, it's only going to get better.
Oh, absolutely. I completely agree with you there, that we have so many top drivers here. And I think when people are critical, they might say, like you said, Lance Stroll is awful.
Yeah. He got a pole. I thought his pole position was really impressive at Turkey.
He's one of these weird ones where, Rain has always said as the great equaliser in the sport, and Lance Stroll has always been a good performer in the wet. And as much as he has massive financial backing behind him, that there is talent there that should be clear to see. But it's the elite, because there's almost like a snobbery of it, because you get this elite level, and obviously essentially I think a bad car in F1 can ruin a driver's reputation, and that's why I kind of hope that Russell's thing, because I thought up until Russell's reputation wasn't ruined, but everyone was excited season 1 and maybe was impressed. Like his qualifying's been good all year, but everyone knew he was there, but didn't know how good George Russell was. But I'd kind of felt like he was on the same level of the Verstappen and Leclercs going forward, and I think he proves that he is of that capable level, given the right machinery. And that was heartbreaking to watch him do it. And I was like, no, don't not give him. He can't have a Mercedes and not get any points.
Yeah, and it's just so frustrating to see. The one weekend Hamilton's not in the car is when it all goes wrong for Mercedes. And I don't mean that as a personal thing. It's more just that repetition. It would have been nice if maybe that could have happened to Hamilton and Bottas in a different race, so we got a different winner. And then the one time George is in that car,
it was the drive to survive curse, because obviously Germany 2019.
Yeah, I heard about this.
And they were with George, I think, the Sake GP.
Yeah.
So honestly, you couldn't write that. Honestly, you could not plan. I think that is the first time I've ever seen in a race them put a wrong set of tires on a car.
Crazy. It was. I can't believe a team that was so dominant did that, and they had a pit stop on the field. And I guess it was awkward for them because of how close they were to the pit lane when the safety car came in. It was a bit like, it reminded me a bit of when Hamilton boxed, I think it was Monaco, wasn't it? And Rosberg jumped in because they were still discussing. And obviously it's a bit like Hockenheim as well, where he had the crash right outside the pit lane. So that whole thing of when there's not enough time, and obviously they said, we don't know if it's true or not, but something with the radio, it could very well just be covering somebody with that. But yeah, it just seems crazy. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of conspiracy theories going around about like something like, I could imagine people thinking something like, they did it for the drama for Netflix or something like that, because they're getting filmed. Now they get even more attention or something crazy like that.
And people will always come up with their crazy conspiracy theories. I kind of feel, if anything, that performance cemented George's place, that if not at Mercedes, a top
Yeah.
team will sign him. He has, like you said, I do feel he has a long future in the sport with that aspect. But I think it was interesting. I do feel Mercedes, because they have been so far ahead, and although Max Verstappen has been pushing them, it isn't realistically pushing him to the extent to the fact that they're worried about a constructors or drivers title
No.
with him in the case. So I feel like when you don't have that person or team pushing you all the way, that you can slip up and make mistakes. Obviously, it's
Yeah.
very difficult. They're a very
Yeah.
good team, but when you can easily see these mistakes slide in, which I think over the course of the season, this has probably been the most mistake prone I've known Mercedes for a while.
Yeah, I think definitely. It just shows maybe if someone put the pressure back on them, I don't know how they would have responded, whether they get stronger from that, whether they get weaker. But yeah, I mean, what do you think is going to happen in terms of the car? Who's, like I said, who's going to be? Because in the midfield, all the cars seem pretty close. I mean, if you look at the constructors table? I think the bottom three teams scored barely. Williams, Haas, and Alpha all had horrible seasons. But from there on, AlphaTauri and up to McLaren in third place, any one of them, and even Red Bull wasn't that far ahead a lot of tracks, to be completely honest. Like anything could really happen in that mix and all the drivers are changing around in those teams.
I think a strict budget cap really could tighten the field up, because I feel Renault, McLaren, and Racing Point / Aston Martin all have a fairly similar budget. And, you saw how close they were through the season. Yes, you could say that I feel like Racing Point were a team who weren't used to competing at the top of the field. Obviously, traditionally in their history, going back to the Jordan days, they've never been a consistent top runner.
I think you could see that, couldn't you?
Yeah.
Like when they were put near the front.
And I think strategy calls this year, they were caught out a little bit. So Aston Martin next year, I think much better, but they've always been a factory team that have massively impressed me. Obviously, as a driver, how having a good team behind you can massively help. And I think they're one of the most underrated ones on the field. What they did on Force India with a shoestring budget compared to everyone else was very impressive. So now that they've got Lawrence Stroll basically bankrolling them, they could be a team who genuinely could challenge Mercedes in the future.
I guess it's a question of what Vettel's capable of, which is, again, another interesting point, isn't it? Because a lot of it's going to come down to what is Vettel. Because I don't think, Stroll has potential for sure, but at the moment, I think most people would be banking their hopes on Vettel, and that's obviously why they're paying him to go there. Is they believe he's still got what it takes, and it's going to be, I guess, really interesting to see what happens from that side of things.
I think he's got an option. If Hamilton can do it, I think Vettel, certainly being a couple of years younger than Hamilton, has potential if the car falls into place. Something like the difficult thing with F1 is because the cars get so quick, it is a young man's game.
Yeah.
In terms of the reactionary stuff, something like IndyCar that's a bit slower. Obviously, you got Scott Dixon winning a 6th title this year at the age of 40.
Yeah.
That's the experience can come into a little bit. So I think, mate, there's so many interesting plays in Formula One, and the season I think also helped by the fact that we had a load of new tracks as well come into the calendar.
The great tracks. I think a lot of people were upset when they saw the proposed calendar for next year, where they basically ignored this year happened and just got the original calendar and then put Hanoi. Because even if these tracks aren't great for overtaking, which you knew this was going to happen. Like Mugello's only got one long straight. The rest of it's just going to create massive dirty air. I mean, in the end, they had decent racing. Nürburgring's quite a tight track. It's not that easy to overtake on because of where the slow corners are and things like that. And that we still go to Abu Dhabi. But I think, but from the driver's perspective, more than anything, it changes seeing the curveballs the teams have to deal with tracks like that. And Imola, I was so happy to see Imola because it's one of my favorite tracks, seeing that on the calendar. And just, there are a lot of big races at Imola this year because it had the GT Challenge and the Formula Renault and things like that also going with them. So it was great to see Imola just kind of come to the forefront of the sport again, because I honestly think it's one of the best tracks, and seeing stuff like Kvyat's move and that whole thing, I think it's a really great track for the drivers. And I think in general, the drivers enjoyed getting to go on all these different tracks. And I've been saying for a while now, I'm really surprised they haven't done a rotation calendar where they choose maybe 5 or 8 core tracks. And I guess the biggest problem is some tracks pay for the season and they need to have a Grand Prix every year to make their money. So because obviously the Grand Prix for some tracks will be their main or their only, if you're like a street circuit, main event. And so you got to keep some tracks on the calendar, but it would at the same time be nice. Say you got like like we used to have Nürburgring and Hockenheim every second year. You could have something like Imola or Mugello every second year as with Monza or just things like that. Give you some more variety with the tracks because there's a lot of great, like Portimao is a great track that was never really used. And I honestly think Istanbul Park is probably the best kind of modern Tilke circuit, especially watching them go there. I don't think it has a bad corner on it. It just looks like a really great track to drive. Even though it wasn't, you could say it wasn't the true track because of the surface acting all strange and things like that. But I think it's just a great layout that creates great racing.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the rotational calendar would be, but I think it's the politics and the financial side of it because F1 comes at such a financial cost for circuits to host. For them to be willing and probably able to host it is locking them in for these kind of longer term contracts on the race. And Hockenheim was only there for a while, and while Mercedes were kind of bankrolling the fact that they wanted a home Grand Prix, and then obviously the 125th anniversary one went tits up like we knew. So that kind of, they were like, we're not so keen to go back to Hockenheim. But yeah, it's such a difficult one, the balance of where F1. I don't envy whoever's in charge because being on a world stage, there's so many factors you have to do. There's so many kind of people you have to please. That I look at maybe regional series like the British touring cars and IndyCar, Super Formula. They race on absolutely brilliant tracks. Because they only have to worry about pleasing the Americans or the British public or whatever. Or, the Japanese, it is difficult for Formula One to do it, but hopefully they can find a right balance to create us some entertaining races because they were brilliant this year.
Yeah, I think, like I said, the variation, it's great for the teams and the drivers to have that challenge. But at the end of the day, I guess, F1's going to go where it's going to go. And I think everyone's going to watch it no matter what happens, even if it is a bit boring because it is I think all motorsport kind of congregates around it and is you go talk to somebody who doesn't know a lot about motorsport. They know Formula One, they know Lewis Hamilton, they know Mercedes because it's just that kind of, it's that big. So I think no matter what, as a motorsport fan, you're always drawn towards F1 because it's got so much prestige surrounding it. So yeah, and that's why obviously people like myself are crazy enough to try and get there. Yeah,
absolutely, mate, absolutely. But we'll round off. This has been a brilliant chat, and I hope obviously everyone's enjoyed listening. It was good kind of having a catch up of your season and also getting a bit of F1 chat in there. You coming out as a fan of the sport as well. It's always interesting to discuss those topics. Yeah. But obviously, best of luck going into next year. I obviously hope you secure the drive you want and a competitive drive next year. And that you can really kind of push forward and keep developing and improving like you have done this year. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on, Bart. It was a really enjoyable chat.
Yeah, thanks. Likewise, I really enjoyed it. And we'll see what we can do next season. I'm definitely looking forward to it. It's what I live for. So
Absolutely. And it's Christmas time as well. So I hope you and your family have a good Christmas. But I'll leave all the relevant links in the description down below to your kind of social medias and stuff. And obviously, if you're new around here, guys, don't forget you can like, subscribe, and ding that bell to kind of keep up to date with all our latest content on the channel. But for now, UF1 fans, keep racing.